The valley was white with mist. It lay low, pressed against the grass and reeds, curling around stones and roots. The first light of dawn had not yet reached the river, and the air was damp and cold. The kind of cold that seeps into the fur, not harsh, but deep. The fox moved slowly through it, a thin red streak between the pale folds of fog. Its paws made no sound on the wet earth. The air smelled of iron, dew, and distant water. Every breath it took left a faint wisp in the air before vanishing. The forest ahead was still half asleep. Branches glistened with condensation, droplets trembling at their tips. Somewhere in the distance, a crow called once, then fell silent again, its voice swallowed by the fog. The fox stopped at the edge of the open field. The light had begun to change, not brighter, just different. The mist caught it and held it, spreading it through the air until everything seemed to glow from within. The fox's coat, damp and matted at the legs, shimmered faintly in that dim light. Then, as it turned its head, the fox noticed something strange. Its shadow stretched along the ground, faint but visible. Too long for the hour, too dark for the pale light. It should not have existed. The mist was too thick for shadows. And yet, there it was, thin and certain, sliding ahead of it through the white. The fox paused. Its ears twitched once. It took a few steps forward, and the shadow moved. Not behind it, not beside it, but ahead. The fox stopped again. The shadow stopped too, a few lengths away, sharp against the dull grass. The fox tilted its head. Its breath rose in two slow clouds. Nothing moved except the mist, curling between them like thin smoke. Then the light shifted again. A brief gleam cut through the fog. A ray of sun breaking through the unseen clouds above. It touched the grass, the stones, the fox's coat, but the shadow did not brighten or fade. It stayed dark, darker than before, as if made not of absence, but of something real. The fox took another step. The shadow seemed to take two. The mist thickened again, swallowing the edges of the field. The fox blinked once, twice, and the shadow blurred, vanishing into the white. The air fell silent. The grass stopped moving. Only the faint echo of the fox's heartbeat remained quiet and steady against the world's hush. Then, far ahead, something shifted. Not sound, not sight, but the small movement of light against the fog. The fox lifted its head, and somewhere deep in the mist, its shadow began to move again. The fox moved deeper into the fog. The world around it began to dissolve. Outlines first, then color, then depth. The air no longer seemed to separate one thing from another. It pressed evenly against everything, thick and pale, like a soft wall of breath. The trees at the edge of the forest appeared as faint vertical smudges, their branches rising and vanishing a few feet above the ground. The fox could smell them before it could see them. Wet bark, old leaves, soil soaked in dew. It paused. The silence here was different. It wasn't the absence of noise. It was a stillness that absorbed sound. When the fox's paw brushed against a fallen twig, there was no snap, no echo, only a feeling that the noise had sunk into the fog and stayed there. The air was colder now. Drops of moisture clung to the fox's whiskers, sliding down in slow threads. The scent of water grew stronger. There must have been a pond or stream nearby, though the fox could no longer tell which direction it faced. It took a few steps forward. The ground was soft, uneven. Somewhere ahead, a faint rustle stirred, a movement like reeds brushing together. But when the fox stopped, the sound didn't fade. It simply ended, as though it had been turned off. The fox turned its head. Its ears flicked once, twice. The mist was uniform, a dull white in every direction, thick enough to hide even the nearest shadows. And yet, the fox could feel it. Something was there. Not danger, not scent, not another animal, but presence. A weight in the air. It took another cautious step. Its paw touched a patch of cold earth slick with dew. For a moment, it thought it saw its own shadow again. Faint, long, slipping ahead through the fog. But this time, it didn't match the movement of its body. The fox froze. Its heart began to beat faster, not from fear, but from instinct. It waited. The mist shifted slightly, curling low across the ground. The shadow stopped too, a few steps ahead, thin, precise, and impossibly clear against the pale surface. The fox lowered its head. The shape didn't change. It wasn't a reflection, and it wasn't a trick of light. The air was too heavy for tricks. The fox stepped to the left, slow, deliberate. The shadow did not follow. It tilted as if adjusting to a different sun, but there was no sun. For a moment, the fox's breath came quick and shallow. The air was too quiet, the fog too still. Every drop of moisture in the air seemed to listen. Then, a faint gust passed through the mist, soft, cold, and directionless, and when it cleared, the shadow was gone again. Only the smell of wet earth remained. And the silence, that dense, unbroken silence, pressed close once more, as though the forest itself had forgotten how to speak. The fog began to thin, not evenly, but in slow, uncertain patches. It broke apart like torn cloth, revealing brief glimpses of the forest floor. Pale leaves, slick moss, the dark roots of old trees reaching across the damp soil. The fox moved cautiously now. Each step left no sound, only the faint shimmer of disturbed dew. The air still carried that same thick quiet, a silence that pressed on its ears until even breathing felt too loud. Then the light changed. At first it seemed like ordinary morning, a dull brightness filtering through the mist, soft and gray. But then came a second light, fainter, moving at a slightly different angle. The fox noticed it in the grass first, two parallel shadows where one should have been. It stopped. The fog swirled faintly around its legs. The first shadow clung close to its body, short and still. The other stretched forward, long, liquid, darker than the ground itself. The fox blinked. For a moment, both shapes wavered, one trembling with the mist, the other perfectly steady. It tilted its head. The shorter shadow moved as expected, following the motion. The longer one did not. Instead, it shifted sideways, slow, deliberate, sliding across the ground like ink spreading in water. The fox lowered its body slightly, alert now. Its tail brushed the wet earth, stirring up droplets that clung to its fur like beads of glass. It watched as the second shadow grew thinner, stretched farther, and came to rest several paces ahead, where the fog was thickest. The light around it pulsed once, dim, then bright again, as though the mist itself had drawn a breath. The fox took a step forward. The ground felt colder. It reached the spot where the two shadows should have met, but the longer one kept its distance. It seemed almost alive now, adjusting itself with every shift in the light. A faint warmth came through the fog, sunlight weak but real. It passed through the mist in golden slivers, scattering across the grass. The fox lifted its head toward the brightness. Its fur caught the glow for an instant, a flash of red and amber, before fading back to gray. And in that light, for the briefest second, the fox saw something impossible. Its shadow blinked. Not the real fox, not its body. The shadow. A small ripple moved across it, a shudder quick as breath, and then it stilled again. The fox stepped back. The movement made no sound. The fog thickened once more, folding over the clearing like a closing hand. The light fractured into two again, one soft and warm, the other cold and sharp. Between them, the fox stood still, caught in both worlds at once. Its ears twitched. The silence pressed harder, and somewhere ahead, deeper in the mist, its longer shadow began to move first. The fog began to lift. Not all at once, but in long, slow waves, thin ribbons of silver rising from the ground, swirling, parting, and revealing the shape of the forest beneath. The fox stepped carefully forward, its body low, ears twitching at every small shift in the air. The path widened into an open space, a clearing, hollow and pale, as though the mist had hollowed it out rather than covered it. The grass there was bent and wet, glinting faintly in the diffuse light. Dew hung heavy on the edges of every blade, trembling but never falling. At the center of the clearing, something waited. A shape, long, narrow, dark, lay flat against the earth, The fox froze. Its tail brushed the ground, and droplets scattered soundlessly. It took one slow step forward, then another. The shape did not move. It was a shadow. Its own. The fox tilted its head, studying it. The outline was perfect. The same curve of the back, the same lift of the tail, the same fine points of the ears. Only it lay several paces ahead, not beneath its body where it should have been. Light pooled softly around it, too even, too still. The fox blinked. The shadow did not. A faint breeze moved through the clearing. The grass stirred, the fox's fur rippled. But the shadow remained absolutely still. Its darkness held fast, untouched by wind or movement. The fox circled slowly around it, paws pressing into the wet grass, leaving prints that filled almost instantly with dew. Its reflection in the droplets shivered, broke, vanished. Still, the shadow stayed, silent and certain, like a hole cut into the morning. When the fox stood before it, the light seemed to bend slightly, not visibly, not sharply, but enough for the world to feel softer at its edges. The air thickened. The fox leaned forward, nostrils flaring. It could smell the earth, the wet bark, the cold grass, but not the shadow. It had no scent. The fox lowered its head until its nose was almost touching the dark shape. The mist swirled faintly around its muzzle. For an instant, it felt warmth, not from the ground, not from light, but from the shadow itself. The warmth vanished just as quickly. The fox stepped back, startled. Its paw brushed the edge of the dark shape, and for a fraction of a second, the shadow moved. It shifted just slightly, like breath against glass. The fox froze. Its heart beat faster. The air around it grew sharp and bright, though no sun had yet appeared. Every drop of dew caught the light at once, 1,000 small mirrors watching the same moment. And then the shadow began to tremble, not with movement, but with intention. The edges quivered, then stretched, outward, forward, as if something inside it had remembered the act of running. The fox took another step back. Its breath left a faint cloud in the air. And in that breath, its shadow began to rise. The clearing held its breath. Nothing moved except the mist, thin curls that drifted near the ground, catching the weak light that filtered through the treetops. The fox stood still, muscles taut, eyes fixed on the shadow that had begun to tremble at its feet. Then it happened. The shadow detached, not like smoke, not like reflection, more like water separating from ice. It peeled softly away from the ground, stretching forward, its shape flattening and reforming in the same motion. For an instant, the fox could see through it, the faint shimmer of grass beneath, warped as though seen through heat. Then it began to move. Slow at first, cautious, almost shy, sliding across the damp grass. The fox watched, frozen. Its breath came quick and shallow, visible in short bursts. Every instinct told it to run, but something older than fear kept it rooted. The shadow moved faster. It flowed toward the far edge of the clearing, the same shape it had always been. The narrow body, the lifted tail, the alert ears, only now separate, free. It left no trace behind, no mark on the ground, no disturbance in the mist. The fox took a single step after it. The ground squelched under its paw, but the sound went nowhere. The fog swallowed it instantly. The shadow was already halfway across the field. For a moment, light broke through the mist again. Thin, gold, the first true sunlight of morning. It struck the running shadow, and for an instant it glowed, not black anymore, but deep amber, like a reflection of fire. Then the light faded, and the shadow slipped back into gray. The fox started to follow. Its body moved low to the ground, each step soundless, measured. But no matter how quickly it moved, the shadow stayed ahead. Same pace, same rhythm, always a few lengths farther. At the edge of the clearing, the mist thickened again, swallowing the running shape whole. One heartbeat, it was there. The next, gone. The fox stopped. Its chest rose and fell rapidly. The air around it was warmer now, carrying the smell of sunlight on wet bark. The clearing looked the same, still, bright, quiet. But something was missing. The light no longer made a shadow. The fox turned slowly in a circle. The sun was there, faint behind the fog, a pale disk in the high air. Its light touched everything evenly, softly, without weight. The fox looked down, its body cast nothing. The grass beneath it was flat, wet, and blank. The fox blinked once, then twice, as though its eyes were refusing to accept the absence. Its fur shivered faintly, scattering droplets of dew. The silence grew thicker, as though the clearing itself had drawn closer. It lowered its head toward the ground, searching for a scent, any sign of what had gone. But there was nothing. No trail, no warmth, no sound of movement. Only the faint impression of direction. The mist ahead had parted, a narrow corridor leading deeper into the forest, pale and almost luminous. The fox hesitated. Then, with the same quiet resolve it had shown since dawn, it stepped forward. One paw, then another. Each step left no print. Each breath hung a little shorter in the air. The fox entered the path, and somewhere ahead, unseen, its shadow kept running. The forest closed behind the fox. The mist, still heavy, gathered in slow whirls between the trunks, curling like smoke around roots and fallen branches. The air carried the faint scent of moss and river mud, old, damp, and cold. The fox moved forward carefully, its ears flicking to catch the smallest sounds. There were none. The forest was silent in a way that felt deliberate, as though every leaf had agreed not to move. Each step should have made a sound. The soft press of paw against wet earth, the slide of grass, the crack of twigs. But there was nothing, not even the faintest whisper of motion. The fox looked back. The path it had crossed was blank. No prints, no bent blades, no sign that it had passed at all. The dew lay unbroken, the mist undisturbed. It was as if the forest had smoothed itself over the instant the fox had moved on. It took another step. The ground felt the same beneath its paws, real, solid, cold. Yet when it turned its head again, the trace of that step had already gone. The fox lowered its muzzle to the ground, breathing deeply. No scent, not its own, not another's. Only air. Thick, empty, and faintly metallic, like the taste of rain before a storm. The trees began to thin. Pale trunks rose higher here, their tops lost in fog. A dim light filtered through the canopy, shifting with each breath of the mist. The fox's fur caught that weak glow, glimmering briefly before fading into gray again. It stopped and listened. Somewhere far off, something cracked, the sound of a branch or maybe a rock shifting. But it came without direction, as though it had happened everywhere at once. The fox turned its head sharply, then froze again, eyes wide and steady. Nothing moved. The mist ahead brightened slightly, forming a narrow, winding corridor through the trees. The fox stepped toward it, drawn by instinct or memory. It could no longer tell which. As it walked, the silence deepened. It began to feel the weight of it, not as soundlessness, but as presence. The air pressed closer to its body, almost physical. Even its heartbeat seemed quieter, more distant. At one point, the fox stopped again and lifted its paw, studying it. Drops of dew clung to the fur, sliding down to the pads. It pressed the paw back to the ground, slowly, firmly, then lifted it again. No print. The forest floor lay smooth and perfect, as if nothing living had ever touched it. The fox's tail flicked once, uncertain. It looked ahead. The path continued, narrowing, fading into the same white-gray nothing. The air was colder now. A low wind began to move through the trees, not rustling them, but humming softly, a vibration just at the edge of hearing. The fox turned its ears toward the sound, listening. It wasn't the wind. It was something beneath it, faint, steady, like breathing. The fox froze, listening harder. The sound faded. The mist shifted again, and for an instant, the fox thought it saw something move far ahead, its own shape blurred and distant, running just beyond sight. Then it was gone. The fox took a step forward, then another. Behind it, the world closed. No trail, no sound, no proof it had ever been there. Only the thickening mist and a faint sense that something, or someone, was waiting just ahead. The forest ended without warning. One moment, The fox was moving between trees so dense they almost touched. The next, there was only open air, wide and pale. The ground sloped gently downward into a field covered in low, wet grass. The mist hung in long, thin curtains, still drifting but no longer pressing close. The fox stopped at the edge. For the first time since morning, it could see the sky. Not the faint blur it had known inside the forest, but a real, open sky. Yet, it was wrong. The sun had risen, but it had no color. It was pale, like the moon pretending to be daylight. The light that touched the field was flat and even, too clean, too still. It gave the world no shadow. The fox stepped forward. Each movement was careful, deliberate. The wet grass bent under its paws, but when it looked back, there were no prints. The field behind it was untouched, smooth, undisturbed, like nothing had passed through. The air smelled thin, faintly of frost and water, but empty of everything else. No scent of earth, no scent of life. Even the fox's own fur carried no trace of warmth. It walked farther into the field. A small stream cut through the grass ahead, narrow and silent. The fox approached it, drawn by thirst, by habit, by something older than thought. The water was perfectly still, like glass stretched tight across the ground. It leaned down to drink. The surface trembled slightly, but not from its breath. The fox blinked. There was no reflection, no eyes, no muzzle, no shape of fur or ear, only the pale gray of sky staring back from the water's skin. The fox stepped back. Its ears flicked once, uncertain. The stream made no sound, though it should have been running. The grass beside it swayed faintly, but there was no wind. It sat down. For the first time, it seemed to notice the weight of stillness. Not heavy, not cruel, just complete. Everything that had followed it, the sound of its paws, the rhythm of its breath, the dark shape that had once belonged to it, was gone. Only the body remained. A small living thing surrounded by silence. The fox lifted its head toward the horizon. Far in the distance, the mist was breaking apart, revealing lines of bare hills washed in colorless light. The world beyond them looked sharp, too defined, as though freshly made and waiting for something to move through it. It stood. The light around it brightened slightly, thin rays spreading from the pale sun overhead. For an instant, they seemed to gather behind it, tracing the curve of its back, the lift of its tail, the narrow line of its muzzle. Almost enough to form a shadow. But when the fox turned to look, there was still nothing. No shape on the ground. No echo of its body. Only grass, wet and shining. The fox looked once more toward the horizon, then began to walk. Slow, steady, without sound. The mist rose behind it, soft and white, closing the field. By the time the light reached its brightest point, the fox had vanished into it completely. The world was empty again. Only the faint ripples on the still water marked that something had once been there. And even those, after a while, smoothed themselves away.